Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. It's the 1st of July, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So today begins the new cadence of the Daily Gwei Refuel episodes. As you guys know, I announced last week that I will only be doing episodes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays going forward. So it's going to be like the semi-Daily Gwei or the every other Daily Gwei, right? It's not going to be the Daily Gwei for the foreseeable future. As I said last week though, I will probably at some point in the future bring it back every day, every weekday I should say, sorry. But for now it's going to be Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But without further ado, let's jump into the news. So a lot happened over the weekend, actually, and a lot with regards to regulatory stuff, and there's some really exciting stuff and some kind of stuff that I was thinking about over the weekend. I was like, I should be excited about this, but I'm not. And I'll get into that in a sec. But first off, I want to kick off with some ETH ETF news. So nothing groundbreaking here, just more news around timelines of when these ETFs are actually going to start trading. So Nate Gerassi here basically said, we got some additional detail on the approval timeline. Issuers have been asked to submit S-1 amendments by July 8th. There would still be one more round of filings after that before ETFs can start trading. So it seems like the ETFs will probably not be going live early July, as I originally predicted. Certainly not on July 8th here. At least it seems like, unless something changes, unless they want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Speed track these things or speed up these things. And I think that that's probably a low probability of happening because of the fact that they've just been dragging their feet on this for quite a while now. But I've seen some people say that maybe it happens in kind of late July. As I've said to you guys before, I don't think it really matters. I actually prefer late July because I think that the later it happens, the better, because of the fact that the market is just generally in a slump right now. Like, it'd probably be more bullish if the ETH ETFs launched when the market was hot again and ETH price was like over 4K and people were beginning to really FOMO back in. Like, that would be a more bullish period of time to launch the ETH ETFs into. But as I've said plenty of times in the past, I don't think it really matters over the long term. The ETFs generally are a long-term passive vehicle. It's not going to be something that is going to do or die based on the first few weeks of trading or anything like that. And the first few weeks of trading are probably going to be very volatile anyway because we don't know what those outflows look like from ETH. I think that's the big question. You know, the Grayscale ETH Trust, that's a big question right now, what those outflows are going to look like. But in terms of inflows, Nate actually had another tweet here where he said that the spot ETH ETFs will be the second most successful debut in ETF history, only behind spot BTC ETFs, which is a pretty big call because obviously the spot BTC ETFs was the biggest ETF debut in history, and for ETH to be the second most successful debut, or the second biggest, and for him to say this in the face of so many people thinking that ETH's not going to get many flows, it's going to be quite bearish for ETH, so on and so forth, is a pretty good and a pretty bullish signal. And for those of you who don't know, Nate is involved in the entire ETF ecosystem. He was one of the only ETF pundits calling for the ETH ETF to be approved, using the same logic that I was using for months. So I really like his takes on things, and I really like following his tweets here. But there is an episode that Bankless actually did with Matt from Bitwise and Alex, I believe, from Galaxy, all about this. And I think it's probably still available for early access. I mean, they had it in their early access for subscribers, but I think it's actually probably available for everyone to listen to right now. And that's a really bullish episode because it basically breaks down what the inflows to the ETH ETFs are probably going to look like. And I mean, the TLDR is that they're going to look like market cap weighted. So essentially you can expect 30% of BTC inflows in ETH. So if BTC got 10 billion inflows within like the first month or something, you can expect $3 billion for ETH sort of thing. So essentially market cap weighted here, which is pretty obvious that it's going to look like that. And Matt and Alex give their reasoning as to why it's going to look like that. So I highly recommend listening to the episode. But I don't see the flows being bearish. Like, even if for the first few weeks, the net flows are essentially zero because you have a lot of flows coming in, but you also have things passing out because of ETH selling off and people just redeeming that because maybe the fee's still too high and so on and so forth. But I think that if you look at a few months out from here, these ETFs are going to bring ETH to all-time high and beyond. I really don't have any doubt in my mind about that, especially as we enter Q3 and Q4, where I believe that, I mean, we're already in Q3, right? July, August, and September are Q3, October, November, December is Q4, but especially as we kind of enter the later stages of Q3 into Q4, I do expect the market overall to be picking up and to be very hot, and ETH obviously is the only asset besides BTC that's going to have a live ETF trading. So that's going to be interesting to see what the flows look like there. But as I said, definitely go recommend listening to that episode on Bankless with Matt and Alex. You can go find that on Bankless's YouTube channel. It got me quite bullish. I usually don't listen to too many podcasts these days, but I do try to make time for ones that I think are going to be unique and insightful, and it definitely was. So definitely go check that one out there. Now, in terms of my own speculation around what the flows are going to look like and the timing around the ETH ETF launch. At this point in time, the launch timing, I think, is mostly irrelevant. It's going to happen in the next few weeks. When the exact date is doesn't really matter. In terms of flows, I totally agree with the analysis of it's just going to be market cap weighted. Like, if you think about how TradFi or how people like to generally structure their investments, especially investments into things or allocations into things that they may not have deep knowledge of, it's usually market cap weighted. Like, if you're a crypto investor, if you're an investor and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to put 5% of my total portfolio, which is probably on the higher end, but just for sake of argument, I'm going to put 5% of my total portfolio into crypto ETFs. Okay, well, what's available to me? Well, ETH and BTC. Okay, well, how do I actually structure this? Like, I don't know what ETH and BTC are, like, in depth. I've heard of Ethereum, I've heard of Bitcoin, but how do I actually structure the allocation here? Well, market cap weighted, 70-30 as it stands today. Maybe that changes to 60-40 in the future, or 50-50, depending on the market cap changing when the rebalancing happens there. But that is the way that most investors look at this. You just do a market cap weighted thing because it's the easiest way to do it, and it's the safest way to do it. It requires very little thought to be put into it for those passive investors, which is what the ETFs are for. That's a product made for people who just want a low risk, conservative, easily managed passive investment vehicle that they can grow their wealth over time. And they can chop and change where they want to put their allocations into, but generally they're playing it rather safe here. So yeah, we're going to see what the inflows look like as a percentage of BTC. It's probably going to take a few months to get an accurate picture here, but I do think that's going to be the case. And as well, there's going to be ETFs launched that are going to be baskets of just BTC and ETH, and they're going to be market cap weighted. There's no other way to weight it. Like, unless you're some Bitcoin maxi who for some reason launches a BTC ETH ETF, and then your allocation is like 100% BTC, 0% ETH, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're launching a product like that, you're just going to do it as a market cap weighting because that's just the easiest path of least resistance waiting to do it. And then you're going to rebalance at some period of time, depending on what the market caps look like at that period of time. That's as simple as that. So I fully expect that to happen. Fully expect that after a few months, it's going to level out to a 30-70 split. And we're going to see changes in that split as the market caps change. So if ETH goes up against BTC, it could become a 60% BTC, 40% ETH split there. And then eventually maybe it's 50-50. In an ideal world, I would like it to be 50-50, or at least I would like to see it be 50-50. But at the same time, I would also like it to see it be, heavy in ETH's favor. Like, for example, imagine if it becomes 70-30, but in ETH's favor, 70% ETH, 30% BTC. That would be really cool to see. But I really do think it's going to be a market cap weighted thing for these vehicles there. All right, moving on. So unfortunately, I think I mentioned this last week where I basically corrected myself and said that ConsenSys beat the SEC with regards to the SEC going after ConsenSys in relation to Ethereum 2.0 or ETH becoming a security because it moved to proof of stake. They withdrew that case against, they didn't withdraw the case against ConsenSys. They basically said they weren't going to pursue that case anymore against ConsenSys. Now, there was another separate thing that they filed that Wells noticed towards ConsenSys for, and this was for a bunch of different things. In particular, it was for MetaMask as a wallet, but also for the staking service that MetaMask has, which actually uses Rocket Pool and Lido in the background. Now, in the lawsuit that the SEC lobbied at ConsenSys over the weekend with regards to this, they actually specifically called out Rocket Pool, they called out Lido. And it was really weird because the whole lawsuit made very little sense. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but some of the really weird stuff was that apparently the SEC was making it out as if you got audits on your smart contracts. That makes it so that what you're doing is more likely to be a securities offering, which was bizarre logic. And I saw that. I was like, okay, that makes no sense. And they were also arguing that Rocket Pool wasn't, I don't know if they were saying it was a custodial staking service, but they were essentially saying that staking through Rocket Pool was like a security or some kind of securities transaction or something like that. They listed a bunch of tokens in there that MetaMask allows people to swap using the MetaMask swaps feature and saying that those tokens are securities. Nothing new here from the SEC, them just doing what they do best, which is not really much. They don't really do anything best, but what they do best, I guess, is bullying, if you can call it that. But yeah, that was a lawsuit lobbied at ConsenSys over the weekend here. Now, my tweet that I put out with relation to this was that, I thought I already hated the SEC as much as I possibly could, but hey, I found a little bit more hate for them when I saw the ConsenSys lawsuit, especially because it just seems like they're continuing this scattershot approach where it makes no sense what they're doing. They're not protecting anyone. They're not helping anyone. No one, I very much doubt there is anyone, literally anyone, any good faith person that has gone to the SEC and said to them, hey, ConsenSys is doing this bad thing via MetaMask. I feel aggrieved by it, or I feel hurt by it. Can you please do something about this? I highly doubt there's anyone that's doing that, at least any good faith actor that's doing that. So at the end of the day, the SEC is not protecting anyone and is just being a bully. Go after the actual scammers. Go after the actual grifters. There's so many of them within crypto. Literally, all the SEC has to do is go to ZachXBT's Twitter profile, and there is a laundry list of scammers on there with proof. He's already doing their job for them. All they have to do is enforce against these people, enforce fines against them, make them pay back the money that they've scammed, put them in jail if you have to. The thing is Zach doesn't have these enforcement powers, right? He's just a freelance guy who calls out scammers and does an amazing job of it. I'm not trying to water down what he does, but he doesn't have the power to do enforcement. He can report these people to law enforcement, but he doesn't have the power in him to do this. He can't arrest people. He can't send them to jail. He can't force them to pay back the money. He can't fine them, but he's doing a much better job than the SEC. And the SEC has billions of dollars in funding, mind you, to do this, whereas Zach doesn't. He relies on donations to continue this work. So from that perspective, the SEC should just be going after those people. Go to Zach's profile, and there you go, right? And you'll get crypto on side by doing this. But I guess that's not their goal, right? Their goal is to bully. The goal is to be a mafia, and that's exactly what they're doing here. But as I said, with all these other cases that the SEC has gone at crypto companies with, I really don't think they're going to win any of these cases, or at least most of the case. As I've said in the past, they may win on staking in some scenarios. For example, Coinbase's staking offering, as I've argued before, it can, using certain arguments, meet the four prongs of the Howey test. But I really don't understand how you could say that was the same case for something like Rocket Pool, especially, but even Lido. Most of the Lido's node operators aren't even in the US either. So it's just a very weird thing that the SEC has done here, but not really surprised by this either. But in other regulatory news, and in, I guess, more positive regulatory news, is that there was actually a big win for clarity over secondary market sales of digital assets. So Eleanor says here, District Judge Amy Berman Jackson has just dismissed the SEC's claim that secondary sales of Binance's BNB token qualify as securities under the Howey test, citing Ripple's Judge Annalisa Torres' opinion that the economic reality of the token's transactions mattered when applying Howey. So essentially, the reason why this is a big win is because you'll remember, obviously, that Ripple won this part of their case against the SEC, where the secondary transactions that were happening for the XRP token, and in this case for the BNB token, aren't considered securities transactions. Now, the reason why that's an even bigger win is because this is the second judge to say this. This is a different judge to the one that was in the Ripple case. And the way it works, at least in the US, I don't know what it works like everywhere else, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is just my understanding here, but the way it works is that essentially, the more judges that rule in a certain favor with the same facts and circumstances, the stronger that case is, and the more precedent gets built here. So that's why it's a big win for clarity, because now any future cases, the judge will reference these two different judges ruling on the same thing, and most likely go in this direction rather than another direction, because there is now case law built up here. There is now precedent built up here that the judge can point to, and going against that means that judge would go against two other judges, and obviously that would not be a very, pragmatic thing to do here. So a huge win there overall. And as I said just before, the SEC's cases against these crypto companies like Coinbase and Binance and Kraken, I really do think, and ConsenSys now and Uniswap Labs, I really do think they're going to lose most of what they're trying to go after them for. But they'll win on some things here and there. There'll be some concessions on some things. And I think that maybe their overall goal is just to slow these things down, slow these companies down, get them bogged down in court, get them spending money on this bullshit, where the SEC has essentially free funding from the government. They don't have to worry about these sorts of things here. And it seems like Gary Gensler, no matter what he does, is completely protected by his party. I mean, the only hope we have at this stage of Gensler being replaced is if a change in administration happens, if the Republicans win the presidential election. It's not far now. We've got November happening here. Obviously we had the debate last week, the US US presidential debate. I'm not going to make any comments about that, but you will have seen everyone's comments on Twitter about this and what that's looking like right now. So really, there may be a real chance of the administration changing here. But as I've said in the past, I don't think that should be something that we necessarily rely on. We should definitely build up our wins across not just the Congress side of things and in the Senate and the legislative side of things, but also in the courts and also with the regulators. We should definitely just try it from all angles. We shouldn't just rely on one thing and pray that thing is what saves us. I don't think that's the best path forward here. But yeah, that was a big win there on that front. But then also, there was another big regulatory win over the weekend. And Justin Slaughter here has a really great thread on this. He's the policy director at Paradigm. I'll link his thread in the YouTube description below for you to check out. But this isn't directly related to crypto. This was a pretty big change within all regulations in the US. So essentially what happened was that there was this Chevron deference case that was a 40-year-old Supreme Court case that I literally just heard about over the weekend, so I'm not an expert on this, but this was overturned by the Supreme Court in I believe a 6-3 vote or something like that. But regardless of the vote, it was overturned. Now, from my understanding, what this basically means is that the SEC, or I guess regulators generally, not just the SEC, but regulators generally, is basically much more constrained in what they can do, and as they typically have been in the past. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, essentially what this means in practice is that these regulators can't have their own little insider court systems, or they're kind of like inside the agency court systems where they decide on things or decide how things are going to go and basically make up for all intents and purposes, their own regulations and their own laws and their own interpretations of these things. They can't do that anymore. What it now happens is that essentially the courts have that power. The actual courts, the lower courts, the Supreme Court, whatever court it is, they have that power instead of the regulators. So the reason why I said this is big news is because it does constrain the regulators, does constrain the regulatory regime from taking advantage of their power and power creeping, but it does shift this power to the courts. So essentially, in the, I guess, like, most pessimistic case is the courts now dictate everything. Now, of course, the courts have been relatively good with crypto. If we're talking about crypto here, relatively good with crypto up until this point. They've definitely sided in favor of crypto most of the time, which has been good to see. But again, like, when it comes to where power lies and interpretations of laws and where enforcement happens and things like that, I would rather not see just one side of the government be given all the power and the other sides be constrained. Even if those other sides have been negative towards crypto in the past, I would rather there be like a separation of powers here. I'd rather there be a balancing of powers here. I know that this is wishful thinking. I know that things just do not work out like this in reality. But when I look at this, all I can see is that, okay, well, the courts are in our favor now, but what if in the future the courts aren't in our favor anymore? And now they have all the power. So essentially, it's like a hot potato of power here. Now, that's my very uneducated, very naive assessment of the situation. As I said, I highly recommend giving Justin's thread a read here, but this goes beyond crypto. This applies to all regulations in the US, to all regulatory bodies in the US, far more important than crypto, I think. Like, if you want to talk about things like aviation regulations or food regulations or pharmaceutical regulations, right? This applies to all of that as well. So this is going to be something that I think results in change over the coming years across the entire regulatory apparatus. We're going to see how the courts treat things versus how the regulators treated them. But I do think it is a big win for crypto, at least for the foreseeable future, because as I said, the courts have generally been in crypto's favor, or generally been much nicer, much less hostile towards crypto, whereas the regulators have not, especially the SEC. Obviously, the SEC has been incredibly hostile towards crypto. Now, by overturning this, they are constrained in what they can do. It's not going to happen overnight. Maybe it's not going to happen over the next few months, but over years, this kind of stuff pays dividends here. But it's definitely a big announcement here, a big thing that happened in the US. But you can go give Justin's thread a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, moving on from the regulatory stuff for now. We got some tech stuff to go over. Now, Georgios, who works at Paradigm, you guys will know he works on the Reth Ethereum client, execution layer client, but he works on a bunch of other things. He put out this really great tweet that I thought was really timely. So he basically said, I started off this tweet by saying, guys, the rollup roadmap is simple. L1 maxes out data availability. That's it from the L1 perspective. I've been saying for a while, we've effectively done with the research on scaling beyond data availability, or DA, and the progress on PDAS such VID makes me think that is also a solved problem. Let's code something for production and cut the alpha research. So that's it. Don't overthink it. That's it. This is what L1 is for the rollup roadmap. L1 is maximizing DA. It's not supposed to be doing anything else for the rollup roadmap here. Yes, there are things like based rollups. Yes, there are things like pre-confirmations. That's orthogonal to this. The L1 itself is being optimized for DA for rollups. Now, of course, there are things outside of this that the L1 needs to optimize for outside of just rollups, such as making sure that we constrain MEV as much as possible, making sure that we improve the proof of stake mechanism on Ethereum to enable certain things like single slot finality and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the rollups, it's just DA. That's what L1 is trying to be. It's trying to be the best DA layer for rollups through blobs, through PDAS, through things like VID as well, VID here, and that's it. And I think that what's happened lately, for some reason, at least on crypto Twitter, is that people just don't understand this, and they seem to be thinking that Ethereum is in dire straits and is in dire need of like an intervention, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Ethereum is thriving. It's firing on all cylinders. L1 is thriving. It's in its best place it's ever been in from protocol development perspective, right? We have like all the clients just working in sync just beautifully. We have the biggest upgrade coming with Pectra early next year, hopefully. And then, of course, I don't even have to say anything about the L2s. They're thriving in their own right, like not just on the development side of things, but also on the adoption side of things. And they got a huge boost through blobs, and they're going to keep getting these boosts through potentially increasing the size and count of blobs, doing things like PDAS, and basically everything related to DA generally, right? Data availability generally on ETH L1, in conjunction with all the other upgrades coming, like Verkle trees, like PBS, stuff like that, right? Like single slot finality within proof of stake, and so on and so forth here. So yeah, I just really like this tweet from Georgios. It really just hit home exactly what L1 is trying to be for rollups. It's just trying to max out the DA, the data availability, because the bottleneck is DA. Really, at the end of the day, for the rollups that use L1, they're not using L1 for anything but DA essentially, and for putting their proofs on there, which is just extremely cheap to begin with. But DA is their main bottleneck, and once we solve that, which we pretty much have at this point until it hits the limit, obviously, the bottleneck then falls to execution, which is also being solved by the L2s themselves. So don't overcomplicate it. That's it. That's been part of the roadmap for like 4 years now. This is not new. Ethereum is executing on its roadmap. This is not bearish. If you don't believe in the Ethereum roadmap or the rollup-centric roadmap, there are plenty of other L1s out there that you can go, you can go be in. And you know what? This is actually the positive case of other L1s existing, because if you want to be into crypto and you don't like Ethereum's roadmap, and you don't like Bitcoin, right? I'm not going to say Bitcoin's roadmap because it doesn't really have one, but you don't like Bitcoin, you don't like Ethereum, you don't like Ethereum's roadmap, you don't like the rollup-centric roadmap, you can go to Solana. Solana's doing the monolithic approach, right? Or you can go to another L1 that's doing a different approach, such as Polkadot. They're doing their relay chain approach. I think there's been a bunch of changes there. I haven't really followed too closely with that. You can go with Nia, that's still trying to do sharding on L1, right? Like execution sharding, but I think they pivoted recently to DA as well, being a data availability layer. But generally, there are other ecosystems that you can go to if you don't care for the rollup-centric roadmap on Ethereum. If you want to be in Ethereum, then this is the roadmap, guys. Like this, as I said, it's not new. This is 4 years at least of what Ethereum is trying to be with this roadmap here. And that's what we've been delivering on and executing on for that time now. So at this point in time, if you no longer buy into the Ethereum vision, then you basically have to go somewhere else. Ethereum is not changing what it is. It's not going to stop being a rollup centric network. It's not going to stop trying to be a settlement layer. ETH is not going to stop trying to be the best money and store of value on the planet. Like, it's going to keep doing those things. That's what you buy into when you buy ETH. That's what you buy into when you're part of the Ethereum ecosystem. And that might be a bit of pill to swallow for some, but that's what it is at the end of the day. And it's not trying to hide that either. It's not making any attempt at hiding that at all. It is what it is. It wears its heart on its sleeve, and that's basically it. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that there. But there is a related tweet to this that comes from Dan Robinson, who works at Paradigm here, where he said, Ethereum researchers get a lot of unfair process criticism. When they publish ideas in progress, the people say the roadmap is constantly changing. When they try to iterate on it before publishing, people say protocol development is happening in secret. And I quote tweeted this and I said, this is simply the consequence of everything being built out in the open. Everything Ethereum does is being built out in the open. Yes, there are private conversations that happen between researchers, but once they get to a point where they feel comfortable sharing their research, they share it. And it's just research. It's not an EIP. It's not something that's going to go into the network. It's not something that anyone's going to adopt. It's just research that they're putting out there. And it's all done out in the open. Ethereum's roadmap is defined for the next 10 years, completely out in the open to be scrutinized and criticized. But imagine how much FUD would be thrown at Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, and all those other companies if their 10 plus year roadmap was being researched and executed on out in the complete open, right? And we don't even need to imagine this, because I remember back in the early iPhone days, there were leaks everywhere about the iPhone, and everyone was criticizing it, being like, oh, it's not going to have this, it's not going to have that, or what if it does this, what if it does that, this makes no sense, so on and so forth, right? It just gets criticized because it's out in the open, it's being iterated on, and people don't understand that. Now, on top of this as well, these companies, their R&D departments are usually their most secretive departments, where it's completely locked down. They use code names for everything. Any leaks are dealt with the full force of the law. Everyone signs an NDA, and it's usually for many years. Like, game companies do this all the time. Like, for example, one of the most hotly anticipated games of all time is Grand Theft Auto 6. There was a leak, I believe, last year that someone hacked in and basically leaked some of the files and showed people what it was, and basically confirmed that it was in development. But no one knew for sure if it was in development. No one even knew what was going on with it for like 8 or 9 years before this leak happened, since GTA 5 came out. Now, that's the level of secrecy that you're dealing with here when it comes to the R&D departments of these companies. Ethereum has none of that. Ethereum is the complete opposite of that. There is literally none of that going on within Ethereum. No one is sitting on something for 8 years, let alone like a month, let alone 8 years, right? And then publishing it and being like, this is what we're doing now. That's not what's happening at all. Everything is iterated on. Everything is researched out in the open. Everything is developed out in the open. And that is how it is supposed to be. That is Ethereum's superpower. But it also brings FUD. It also brings distractors. It also brings stupid takes from people who are just not informed, but they want to have their opinion anyway. It's kind of a sad fact of life that the people that are the least informed seem to have the loudest voices. But hey, that's just the fact of life that we have to deal with. And if you're listening to the Refuel, you're more informed than I believe 99% of people on Ethereum. But that's my kind of take on that one there. Now, to finish up today's episode, have something related to Farcaster. So Dan Romero tweeted out, funny, it's always ironic when he tweets out something about Farcaster, right? Because he's obviously building a competitor here. But there is something that has been introduced on Farcaster, well, technically on the Warpcast client, called Pay on Warpcast. So you can pay someone with USDC in under 10 seconds. It's mobile first with your existing wallet, no having to look up or remember an address, close to instant confirmations, and 0 fees on base. So essentially there is a video here showing what this looks like. You bring up the interface here and basically you type in what you want to pay. It goes to your Coinbase wallet, you confirm it, or any other wallet that you have, you confirm it, and then you pay the account that you were on in USDC. This literally took 8 seconds for him to do. And this is all done on Base with 0 fees, using USDC natively through Warpcast. This is, again, stuff that leads to mass adoption, guys. This is the kind of stuff that I love seeing integrated into things like social networks, where essentially, because it's built on a on-chain social network, you can just do this natively. There is no need to essentially, bolt on things or to require the user to install anything or anything like that. It's done natively here with what the user already has, a wallet and the Warpcast client. So very, very cool to see this. And once again, that is something that I think is inching us closer and closer towards the adoption that we want to see of real use cases on Ethereum and within crypto generally. Obviously, stablecoins are the biggest product, I think, within crypto. So anything revolving stablecoins always gets me excited, even though though like you can't speculate on it, right? You can't buy a stablecoin and hope that it goes to like $2 or something. Oh, I mean, you can, but like it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen. It usually happens the other way, where essentially you buy a stablecoin, then it goes down. Obviously, we all probably know about what happened with Luna's stablecoin, right? UST. That went to zero, but even USDC went to 90 cents. There was a depeg, stuff like that. But hey, that's why I think a lot of people don't talk about stablecoins, is because there's not really any way to speculate on it besides maybe buying ETH as like a kind of ecosystem bet on stablecoins continuing to grow, especially on L2s. But yeah, anyway, enough rambling about that. I think that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all on Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.